Hey everybody, MTG Lissy here, and today I'm going to share with you my deck tech for Sidisi, Brood Tyrant. Whenever Sidisi, Brood Tyrant, enters the battlefield or attacks, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from your library, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. So, there are 2 different ways that you can make this deck. You could make it zombie tribal, or you could just make it some sort of graveyard synergistic reanimator deck. I picked the second version because I think there are better zombie tribal commanders, and you don't need Sidisi all the time if you just have a great reanimator strategy. So without further ado, let us get to the deck tech. So, what are the goals of this deck? The first goal is to mill yourself. This means you're going to be throwing all of the creatures from the top of your library into your graveyard that you possibly can. And you're going to want to do this as quickly and as efficiently as possible. The second goal of this deck is to get zombies. Getting random zombies just happens to be a side effect of Sidisi's awesome Enter the Battlefield and Whenever She Attacks ability. In this deck, you're pretty much going to be using the zombies for pure value. They're there to sacrifice, to use abilities, to chump block and protect your life total, or as a win con to swing out and kill your opponents in the end. But the main goal of this deck is to reanimate some sweet creatures from your graveyard.
Get hoofed.
So, while you're fooling around, milling yourself, getting zombies and reanimating stuff, you're probably gonna want something to help you control the game so you don't just flat out die. This is where the counter spells and removal come in. Note that Sidisi's ability only triggers off of creatures. That means that you want to have a critical mass of creatures to mill so that you can get a zombie off of Sidisi every time. So now, how are we going to go about throwing all these creatures from our library into our graveyard? Well, of course, we've got a bunch of creatures to help us do that. It would be a grave mistake to not include these dredge cards in your deck. Nyx Weaver Spider and Sewer Nemesis allow you to mill yourself on each upkeep, and Tasigur lets you get rid of cards you don't want in your graveyard, as well as mill you and return things to your hand. What more could you need? Next here, we have a deceptively good card in Phenax, God of Deception. Whenever you have a zombie in play, you can just tap that zombie to mill yourself and probably get another zombie in the process. This lets you get almost anything you want into your graveyard and gets you a huge amount of zombies in the process. It would be a big mistake not to include Phenax in this deck. Next, we have Buried Alive and Jared's Orders, which are basically tutors in this deck with ad-free zombies glued on. These next few cards are great at giving you continued milling effects. These enchantments and artifacts are too mesmerizing to allow the fact that they are not creatures to alter our perception of them. Don't get salty, these cards are just plain strong. So now that you've got all your creatures into your graveyard, you gotta have a few ways to pull them out again. Shieldred is probably one of the best reanimation creatures available in black. Hell's Caretaker allows you to get any creature from your graveyard into play at the small price of sacrificing one of your random zombies. Marin and Genesis give you repeatable ways to return creatures from your graveyard to your hand. Body Double can enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature in any graveyard, not just yours. Gravespawn Sovereign allows you to tap your random zombies to put creatures from your graveyard into play. Animate Dead is a reanimation spell too good not to include in this deck. Victimize, Dread Return, and Endless Obedience are all better reanimation spells in this deck because you'll always have random zombies lying around. Living Death and Rise of the Dark Realms are mass reanimation spells that, when resolved, usually mean you're winning the game. Whip of Erebos and Mimic Vat are 2 great artifacts that allow for temporary but repeatable reanimation. Life from the Loam is an awesome way to mill yourself and return all the land cards that you mill from your graveyard to your hand so you never miss a land drop. Phyrexian Reclamation is a cheap and repeatable way to return creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. Here are some examples of some huge creatures that you'll want to be reanimating from your graveyard. Avenger of Zendikar, Jin Gitaxias, Archetype of Endurance, and of course, Craterhoof Behemoth.
Get hoofed.
An important part of any EDH deck is Mana Ramp. Dreamscape Artist is Harrow on a stick, or a log, or whatever he's sitting on. Anyway, he allows you to put creatures into your graveyard, which might be where you want them to be. I wonder what type of creatures you'd want in your graveyard. Wood Elves and Fairhaven Elves are staples that allow you to place lands directly into play from your library. Sakura Tribe Elder and Yavimaya Elder allow themselves to be sacked so you can reanimate them later and use them again if you want. Next are the control cards. All of the creatures shown here have some way to remove something of your opponent's from the board. For non-creature removal, I've included a Putrefy and a Murderous Cut. Mystic Snake, Slumgar Sorcerer, and Glenalandra Archmage are counterspells that you can recur again and again using your reanimation spells. Counterspell and Logic Knot are both basically counterspells for blue-blue in this deck. Forbid is a counterspell with a great buyback that even helps you out. Heaven forbid you put good creatures into your graveyard. And finally, here are some great value creatures to include in your deck. Runesguard Demon and Sidisi Undead Vizier can be used as recurable and repeatable tutors in this deck. Arcanus the Omnipotent, Moldrifter, and Bloodgift Demon allow for card draw in this deck. Kessig Cagebreakers, Night Howler, and Spider Spawning are great cards to have when there are a lot of creatures in your graveyard. Eternal Witness is one of the best ways to return any card from your graveyard to your hand. You will be eternally grateful. Wonder and Torrent Elemental are two different creatures that can help you to push damage through. Torrent Elemental taps your opponent's creatures, and Wonder gives your creatures flying. The crazy thing about Wonder is that it just sits in your graveyard, making it hard for opponents to remove. Wonder is pretty wonderful. No wonder it's included in this deck. And finally, we have some sweet big mana cards. Cyclonic Rift for a one-sided board wipe, Green Sun Zenith to fetch up our Crater Hoofs or other value creatures, and Villainous Wealth to steal all of your opponent's things. So, that concludes my deck tech for Sidisi Brood Tyrant. Do you like the deck? Do you have any comments, questions, concerns? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this video. Thank you so much. This is MTG Lissy, signing off.